we gather together to worship on the land of the Wurundjeri people. As we gather, we acknowledge that the wattle, the cockatoo, and this bend in the Birrong River were taken without consent or negotiation. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and we pledge ourselves to work alongside these First Peoples to achieve a just future for all.
So, for those of us who are entering into worship today, living in the state of Victoria, and I know that we have people watching from far and wide across the seas and around Australia, but for those of you who are in Victoria and who are part of this wee community of St Andrews, it's been a really big week. It's been a tough week. It's been a week where we have watched the figures rise in terms of infection and where we have felt the clouds of this virus grow ever darker around us. Today's worship is all about hope. It's about this generation. It's about what we're facing in the here and now. So my friends, I invite you to open your hearts, to not be afraid, and to hear the words of Jesus when he says, "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." Let us worship our God. When television was first invented, they used to do this thing called a fireside chat, and the screen would be all black and white. I don't know this because I'm incredibly young, but apparently there was a black and white television, and there would be often a very sort of comforting looking grandpa who would sit in a chair with a small dog by his side and tell you that everything was going to be okay. So we don't have that grandpa for you today, but we do have Alan, and he does have Pippin by his side, and he is going to share with us a message about how actually everything is going to be okay. Thanks, Alan.
The reading this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 16 to 19 and 25 to 28. But to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Your wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. And from verse 25, at that time Jesus said, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent, and have revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for such is your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. These are the words of faith.
This is not a drill. My name is Greta Tilbury. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protests. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about, but what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions could make a massive difference.
Pretty cool, right?
But only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now when we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
But to what will I compare this generation? It's like children sitting in a marketplace and calling to one another. We played the flute for you and you did not dance. We wailed and you did not mourn. But to what shall I compare this generation? Over the last year or so, and in particular over the last few months, I've been doing a number of funerals for a particular generation. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this service of celebration and farewell. My name is the Rev Alexander Sangster. I'm a minister of the Word with the Uniting Church in Australia, and we gather together today to give thanks for the life of and to deeply mourn the loss of Elsie. Elsie was born in 1921, the fifth of 6 children. She was part of a generation, the likes of which the earth will never see again. She grew up just after the end of World War I, lived as a young woman through the horrors of World War II. She knew what it was to be part of a world in deep trauma. She knew what it was to fall in love with a young man who went off and became a soldier and came back forever scarred. She knew what it was to grieve deeply. She knew what it was to wait for peace. Keep the home fires burning. To what shall I compare this generation? But what shall I say? Tilly, youngest of three, February 2020. It sucks to be 10. Mother, don't say sucks, dear. Why does it suck? Tilly, first I had climate change, then I had bushfires, and now there's this stupid virus and all this bad stuff for black people. Mother, yes, well, darling, it's always been terrible for black people, for people of colour, but this year they have said enough, and other people, good people, have joined with them, and they've said enough too, so that's a good thing. But you're right, it has been a pretty hard year to be 10. Every generation has its trauma and its nightmares. Every generation has its reds under the bed and its black plagues and fire, its Roman invasion and colonisation, its genocide and its despair. Every generation has its recessions and depressions, its confessions of guilt, its cover-ups and lies, great and small. And every generation has its heroes, its shining light of love, sung and unsung, lifting snakes up onto poles and leading the way for 40 years through the lost lands of the wilderness, riding on the backs of donkeys and refusing to take up arms, sitting under Bodhi trees, going on hunger strikes, women's rights in rotting English jails, sitting on steps outside Swedish Parliament for days on end, or standing up for the education of girls in a country where women have been hounded indoors and told to cover up their faces and their minds or be shot for refusing. But to what shall I compare this generation? In today's reading, Jesus berates the people of his time for not recognizing the hope amongst them. Look, he says, look, here is John, wild man of camel and honey. Oh, but no, he's too austere for you. And here I am, but I am a glutton and a drunkard. So you wail and you weep and you fall asleep when the possibility of hope is right here in front of you. To what shall I compare this generation? So where is the hope? Who are the leaders for us? A few months ago, two girls from two very different cultures met for the very first time, Greta and Malalia. Both girls shot to worldwide fame after standing up for major global issues, and both are known individually for their activism on climate change and women's rights. Greta became a household name after skipping school in Sweden to protest against climate change, and has addressed the United Nations in New York and set a generation on fire with hope. Malalia was shot in the head by the Taliban in Pakistan for campaigning for girls to be allowed to go to school. And in 2014, she became the youngest recipient for the Nobel Peace Prize for her advocacy in education. And she's just graduated a few weeks ago from university. She has become a global symbol of the resilience of women in the face of oppression. And Greta, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 and 2020. And she has been threatened by millionaires and abused by politicians. She has stood before the world and called the young to action and the old to account. As she said to the UN, the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you, and if you choose to fail us, I say to you, we will never forgive you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now, this is where we draw the line. The world is waking up. Jesus reminds us today that our heroes don't always come to us looking or sounding as we would expect. And he speaks to us of wisdom, otherwise known in the Greek as Sophia, wisdom, and how she will be vindicated by her actions. And we are reminded by Jesus that long before the incarnation, there was another leader of love and light striding through the marketplaces. And we can read about her in the books of Proverbs and in Job and in the wisdom of Solomon. And we can hear in her song that she has been with God from the beginning. In the beginning was Sophia. When God set the heavens in place, I was present. When God drew a ring on the surface of the deep, and when God fixed the clouds above, when God fixed the vast wells of the deep and the sea and assigned its limits, when God established the foundations of the earth, I was there. In this passage, we have from Jesus a great vindication of the feminine divine and the Holy Spirit who fills us all up and sends us out. So, in this passage, we have from Jesus a great vindication of the feminine divine. The Holy Spirit who fills us up and sends us out. Here in this passage, Jesus is calling on a power more ancient than himself. And he is tapping into holy mystery. A source, the source, which is available to us all. And without which we cannot do the dangerous and difficult work of love. Because sometimes the work that we are called to do in the world is the work that the powers that be do not want us to do. Like stopping climate change or standing up for the education of women, even when a pandemic sweeps our streets and distracts us with its silent stealth. These issues, they have not gone away. A warning, though. When we open ourselves up to wisdom, to spirit, to source, we can often feel like we have no choice but to do this work. Because our eyes are open now, and we cannot turn away. A consolation, though. Jesus tells us that by doing this work, the work of justice and non-violence and love, we will find rest. Come to me, all who are weary. We will find rest, perhaps not in our bodies or our minds, but in our souls, because we will know, as Greta and Malala and Bonhoeffer and Martin Luther King Jr. and Dorothy Day and Rachel Carson and Eddie Mabo and Steve Biko knew, that they are doing everything they can to be part of the creation of the kingdom here on earth. And nothing can be more restful than that. To do all you can, with all you have, however big, however small. The smile to the shop assistant who has been standing all day in the breath of others. The reaching out to the neighbour who is all alone. The signing of a petition to stop a mine, the sitting in a tree, in the Tarkine, in the wild winter winds to prevent the logger from tearing it down, the living as a carer, day in, day out, and not being frightened of another's pain, and not being repulsed by the body in its brokenness, from just getting another cloth and saying, that's okay. That's okay. Acts big and acts small. They all add up to create the whole. The easy yoke means working towards a future in which all God's dreams will finally come true. So what shall we say to this generation? Well, despite, first I had climate change, then I had bushfires, now there's this stupid virus and all the bad stuff for black people. Despite this, Tilly, I feel that maybe this generation, just maybe it's going to be okay. Because they have Greta, and they have Malaya, and they have us. Every single one of us. And we are going to do everything in our power, connected to source, everything, great and small, to save the world. Aren't we?
I heard the voice of Jesus say, come unto me and rest. Lay down, O weary one, lay down your head upon my breast. I came to Jesus as I was, a weary, cold and sad. I found in him a resting place, and he has made me glad. I heard the voice of Jesus say, behold, I freely give the living water. Thirsty one, lay down and drink and live. I came to Jesus and I drank of that life-giving stream. My thirst was quenched, my soul revived, and now I live in him. I heard the voice of Jesus say, I am this dark world's light. Look unto me, your morn shall rise, and all your days be bright. I looked to Jesus, and I found in him the light, my son. And in that star of life I'll walk till travelling days are done.
Our prayers today were created by one of our community members, Kat. This is a beautiful little animation that she's prepared, inspired by a poem by Mary Oliver. And I thought it captured some of the yearning for spring, the yearning to be out of this winter of pandemic that is inside all our hearts. So I invite you to listen and watch now a prayer from Mary Oliver and from Kat. There is a poem by David White called The Winter of Listening. This last week has been a winter for us here in Victoria. And of course the winter spreads out across the world in places that are struck down more ferociously than ours by the silent yet deadly virus. In his poem, David speaks about how there is no one but me by the fire. My hands are burning red in the palms while the night wind carries everything away outside. And all this petty worry while the great cloak of the sky grows dark and intense around every living thing. All these years forgetting how easily we can belong to everything simply by listening. So my friends, on this day, let this winter that we are in, this winter of listening, be enough for the new life that we must call our own. And in this winter of listening, let us listen to the words of another poet, Mary Oliver, as she opens our hearts to spring. I am ready for spring, but it hasn't arrived. Not yet. Still, I take my walk looking for any early enhancements. It's mostly attitude. I'm certain I'll see something. I start down the path, peering in all directions. The mangroves, as always, are standing in their beloved water, their new leaves very small and tender and pale. And look, the way the rising sun strikes them. They could be flowers opening. So a blessing for you today, my friends, from this generation. A blessing of you from a generation of young women and young men and young rainbow people who are standing up to defend the planet, to protect the vulnerable, who march in the streets and sit in trees and sit on steps, who stand up and dance. A blessing to you today of the Sophia Christ wisdom, the spirit of the divine feminine who lives within us all. Feel the source of power. Say yes and go out. Go out and change the world. Amen.